Apparently, the Irish say they're big procrastinators.
But they also make an excuse, because I'm Irish, I know. It's called productive procrastination.
Well, that can work.
What do you make of somebody who procrastinates and doesn't feel 1 ounce of guilt?
Are they procrastinating? Because it's by your own standards. Do you expect to be worse off? I would say if you are putting off and you don't care about whether your performance or productivity, you're lazy.
Okay. Now, Victor Hugo, for instance, you write about the great Victor Hugo. Apparently, his wife, or he, would strip naked, give his clothes to his wife, so he would be chained to his desk to write.
Actually, you're almost.
Was that Victor Hugo, or was that someone else?
You're mixing two of them. It's
Okay.
Victor Hugo and Melville from
Moby.
Moby.
Moby Dick.
Yeah, Moby
Herman
Dick.
Melville.
Yeah, Herman Melville.
He was the naked one?
Well, Herman Melville was the naked one, and I
Okay.
think Victor Hugo. No, Herman Melville was the chained one.
Oh, chained to the desk to write.
And Victor Hugo was the one who was naked.
Okay.
So he gave the clothing to the valet, and so he couldn't leave his room. He said he's nothing to do but work, because he knew. It was like a form of pre-commitment. He knew, I'm going to be tempted to procrastinate later. What can I do now to prevent that?
Even though writing is your passion, that's what intrigues me.
No.
If writing is your work and your passion, you have found your passion and you love to write and it's who you are, and you can't wait for it to burble out onto the page. If it's your job, if you're John Irving or Margaret Atwood, you have to have discipline.
Margaret Atwood procrastinates.
Yes, she does.
Yes, she does. And the problem is that a lot of writers love to have written. We love to have it once it's done. I mean, exercising, do you like to feel having exercised? Well, a lot of people do.
They do?
Yeah, having exercised. The feeling
having
after.
Oh, euphoric after.
Euphoric after, yeah. Exercising, not so much. And the same thing with writing. So you want to have that endorphin release. You want to have that sense of pride.
Right.
But between that sense of accomplishment is actually the horrible job of the work itself. And what can we do? So these people are kind of struggling to kind of deal with the fact that they don't want to do it now, but they want to do it.
Okay. So take me back to the Greeks, to the Odyssey, to Ulysses, Helen. Helen of Troy and the Trojan horse. How does that fit in?
That's the first classical example of pre-commitment. This is essentially the fact that people acknowledging that we have weak wills. That, though we intend to do a work or do a task or do a New Year's resolution, that will be tempted and fail. Yeah. So Ulysses is going to go by the island of the Sirens, the ancient hero.
The bare-breasted women.
Yeah, the bare-breasted women with voices so pure and melodious that when you hear them, you'll want nothing but to listen, and you'll just listen and listen until you die from starvation. Yeah. So he knows that ahead of time, so he has himself tied to the mast. Right?
Right.
Now, he does something now to prevent himself from doing otherwise later. Today, we do almost the exact same thing. People, for example, in Mac users have something called the Freedom Program, which prevents them from acting otherwise later. It turns off their access to the internet irrevocably.
So it's like a nanny.
Yeah, like Ulysses tied himself to the mast.
Yeah.
He couldn't act on his later desires to hear the sirens.
Okay, so instead of the bare-breasted beauties, you have a video game or a chocolate cake
that's
luring
right.
you in the modern age.
And you know that I'm going to be going by the island of the sirens. I'm going to be going by that chocolate cake later. I know I'm going to give in to that later. Right. I don't want to give in to it. I don't want to die by the sirens. I don't want to gain another pound. What can I do now to prevent myself from doing that in the future? So you know yourself and you see it ahead of time. This is the essence of pre-commitment. This is why the clocky you have in the bed, you're going to sleep in. This is why snooze and lose. This is why people do these things, because they're trying to kind of mold your will in some way to get the desired result.
And the aha factor is this world is designed to make us goof off.
Oh yeah, well, it's very profitable. It's much better when the temptations, all these kind of short-term rewards.
Right.
Right.
If I get an early start, I do worse, people say. The tortoise, the hare thing.
No, that's not true.
No, I know it's not true, but what about boredom?
Boredom, well, of course, but it's the question of, would you be worse off? It comes back to the same question. Would you be worse off doing it later than now? And the question is, that chocolate chip cookie, it's going to be pleasurable now, and you'll feel guilty about it afterwards. And you say, I wish I didn't give in.
Right.
And this is the essence of procrastination. But during the meanwhile, that chocolate chip cookie factory is very happy you bought that chocolate chip cookie.
Sure is.
That's right.
So do you think, Professor, you can learn industriousness?
Oh yeah, you can.
Can you learn it? Can you
Yes.
cure this?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, to some extent, there is a genetic component. So some of us have a greater likelihood or vulnerability to procrastination. I'd say that me, myself included. But if you just acknowledge that, if you just say, great, I'm like a diabetic. If I don't exercise and eat right, I'll develop diabetes. If I don't take my own weak will into account, then I'll kind of become a procrastinator. Fortunately, there's a lot you can do about it.
I thank you. Nice to meet you.
My pleasure.
Piers Steele. That sounds like a James Bond name.
I know, Piers
I know.
Steele.
Wow. So, go. The procrastination equation, how to stop putting things off and start getting stuff